While the rest of us may decompose rather quickly, our skeletons will be around a lot longer, and ones that have been untouched for centuries can give us clues about our past. Other discoveries might leave us confused about bizarre ancient practices, forcing us to ask more questions. Here are bone discoveries that shock the world. But first, we'd like to give a quick shout out to this viewer who left us a comment on a recent video. We enjoy your feedback and hope you enjoyed this video as well. Number 13. Elongated mummy skulls. Imagine being an archaeologist and coming across these elongated skulls from Peru. You'd probably be thinking that they were some sort of alien creature who visited Earth at some point in time, and sometimes your first instincts can be correct. Centuries ago, it was fashionable among some of the ancient Incas and other pre-Columbian civilizations. In an episode of Ancient Aliens, an elongated skull found in the Americas was DNA tested. It proved to have similar DNA to a Scottish person, meaning that Europeans must have been there sometime around 500 AD. A decay of certain DNA cells wouldn't allow for the researcher to determine if it was male or female. It was also not fully determined whether or not it was completely human. Number 12. Vampire skeleton. This skeleton found in Bulgaria and a region south of Romania from the 13th century has a metal stake driven through the chest. This, of course, is a common way you have to kill a vampire. Was this vampire taken away from his immortal life with a metal stake through the heart? This isn't the only skeleton found like this in the area. It was believed to be a fairly common practice to drive the stake through the heart for those who lost their life in a certain non-natural incident. Sometimes they would even need to cut off a leg to keep them from rising once again. Were the people of Bulgaria experiencing some sort of zombie apocalypse or what? Number 11. Buddha statue. Imagine discovering a Buddha statue from 1,000 years ago, thinking you found yourself a pretty cool piece of historic artwork that maybe you can put in your living room someday if no one finds out. After doing more research on the piece of art, you find an X-ray and discover that there's something or someone hiding inside. Researchers at a museum in the Netherlands were shocked to find out that a skeleton was being kept inside in a perpetual lotus pose for eternity. The mummified monk began drinking poisonous tea, which caused intense vomiting and rapid weight loss. It's thought that this would make the body too poisonous to the point where bugs and other parasites won't aid in the decomposition process. After about 1,000 days of repeating the poisonous tea, the monk was turned into a statue. Number 10. Puzzling alien skull. A demonic-looking skull was found in a German bunker in Russia near a briefcase. The strange appearance of the skull leads many to wonder the possibility of Germans in the 1940s making contact with UFOs. Some conspiracies believe it was the skull of a dead demon. Either way, there is no possible way of knowing exactly. Skeptics believe the long exposure to sand and other elements of the bunker could have also altered the shape. Some believe it's from some type of animal who we may have not made contact with already. Number 9. Skeleton Lake. In 1942, a British forest guard was roaming through the Himalayas when he made a shocking discovery. Over 200 skeletons were found at the lake of Rupkund at an elevation of over 16,000 feet. What he initially thought were bodies from an invading army, he began to study the site closer and revealed some frightening details. The bodies and artifacts left over dated back to 850 AD and were all killed in some gruesome, traumatic fashion. There was a group of pilgrims making a stop at the lake for water when out of nowhere a freak flash hailstorm took place, leaving many with fractured skulls. This photo here seems to show that there are still bodies waiting around to be found, and not all of them are gone just yet. Number 8. The Cheddar Man. This guy already sounds like the things urban legends are made of, and his skeleton tells some shocking stories. Found inside a cave in the Cheddar Gorge, where cheddar cheese is often aged, a skeleton of a man with a broken right orbital socket was discovered, and he's believed to be over 9,000 years old. This makes him Britain's oldest complete skeleton. He would also have dark skin and light eyes, and the injuries to his face seemed to be fatal. He also had a terminal bone infection in any case, and without modern medicine, you can imagine it would have been extremely painful and not fun to look at. The entire skeleton was uncovered in 1903, and other skeletons were also found. Many bones they found here were animal bones containing knife marks indicating a hunting and gathering tribe. But they also made the unsettling discovery of a human skull that seemed like it was used as a cup. It's also been theorized that cannibalism was a ritual practice here, and the Cheddar Man was another victim. And this is where your cheddar cheese comes from. Good to know. Number 6. The Knights of Krakow, Poland. Located at the Benedictine Abbey in Krakow, Moglia in Poland, graves of a few knights were uncovered, placed in a bizarre fashion. One of the skulls that we see here has 3 bricks placed on different sides of the face. One on each side of the head, one underneath the jaw, and in some sort of strange ritual fashion. The monastery that we see here in this photo has been around for roughly 8 centuries now, and mysterious discoveries have been made. The bones here date back to the time when the Caesarean order movement was in full effect. The people belonging to this movement were some of the most strict Christian monks that spread across Europe. What secrets could these skeletons be hiding? Number 5. Mummies of Guanajato. During the cholera epidemic, it was difficult to tell who was still alive and who wasn't due to disease symptoms. Hoping to restrict the spread of cholera, many were buried shortly after death, even if they were still alive, if that makes sense. The mummies of Guanajuato were the result of a horrific outbreak of this deadly disease beginning in 1870 and ending in 1959. Cemeteries were beginning to make money from charging people to permanently be buried, and if they didn't pay up, the bodies were exhumed. They also began making money showing the horrific mummies of this area, which were partially preserved due to the dry climate. Several well-preserved specimens can still be seen. This woman here was one of the unfortunate few who were buried alive on accident. When she was exhumed, they found her body lying face up and scratch marks on the coffin. Her last agonizing moments were left gasping for air. They could have at least buried her with a bell or something, right? Number 4. New Guinea bone daggers. Imagine being a prisoner knowing all too well that your bones were about to be turned into daggers, which would then likely be used to attack other prisoners. Being held captive in New Guinea when Europeans were beginning to arrive must have been a frightening sight to see. Missionaries believed that they're possibly made out of some type of animal ivory until more details were eventually found. Typically measuring about 12 inches long, they could have also been made of leg bone from the warrior's deceased relative. The human bone daggers turned out to be more effective than cassowary daggers, which are a flightless bird known in the area. Number 3. The Screaming Skeleton. Egyptians are known for having some of the best methods of preserving bodies for the afterlife. This one here looked like it had a rough path. Brutal execution methods by the Egyptians could be the reason here, however. Grave robbers were commonly the most severely punished of all the criminals, and this one here was likely buried alive. It seems likely that all the salt from the desert preserved his remains for eternity. Number 2. The San Diego Giant. Abraham Lincoln once said, "The eyes of that species of extinct giant whose bones fill the mountains of America have gazed on Niagara as do ours now." While some seem to claim that he's talking about woolly mammoths and not humans, you have to still wonder what made Abraham Lincoln say such a thing. Could it have been that giants actually existed? It would seem a little bit coincidental that newspaper articles have also claimed that giants have been buried inside. Nonetheless, in the late 1800s in America, it was a time for prospecting, and some shocking discoveries were sure to come. In 1895, a newspaper known as The World printed an article on a giant that was discovered, measuring 9 feet tall, or 2.74 meters. It was, quote, "the biggest giant ever known." It was also believed to have been about 250 years old and buried with a hood on its head. The giant was sold to the Smithsonian, who quickly accused the discoverers of being a fraud, claiming that it was made of gelatin. But would the Smithsonian actually admit to it being real? Who knows? And before we get to our number 1, we'd like to hear what you guys think is the craziest, most frightening discovery on this list. Leave us a comment and maybe we'll feature you in an upcoming video. Number 1. New York City Hidden Bone Vault. Sewer workers in New York City came across a dozen skeletons inside a creepy 19th century vault in Washington Square. The mysterious vault measured 15 feet wide, 20 feet long, by 8 feet high. The DNA evidence tends to determine the remains being over 100 years old. Historians tend to believe that it might have been a burial site for Native Americans, sometime between 1797 and 1826. The burial vault still remains a mystery of exactly what it was used for. Many were still creeped out, while others were simply fascinated that something could exist right under their own feet. Washington Square Park was used as a public burial ground not long after the Revolutionary War, so it makes sense, but still shocking and spooky.